This week in a conversation, I have the honor to receive film producer, screenwriter, David Cameron. He's joining me from California. We're going to be talking about his many accomplishments, awards that he has won. But before we get into this interesting conversation with film producer, screenwriter David Cameron, I also have to remind you of my own um, uh, accomplishments. Specifically the last two novels that I just published, one last year and one this year. Last year's one was Bittersweet Memories of Last Spring. And this year, which is the sequel, which published back in July, under the title Last Spring was Bittersweet. So we still remain, remember, in the framework of memory. So if you really want to enjoy a good Caribbean slash South Florida story, so this is the story that you would want to mix. So where can you find it? Or can you find both books? Everywhere they sell books, including Walmart. So this is the best way I keep telling you guys to support my literary journey. And also, one thing I just want to remind you too, at the end of this video, if you like the conversation with me and David, hit the like button, please, and continue to support the conversation. So let's get started. Again, my name is Ardain Isma, and I'm here this evening or this morning, it depends on where you are across the world, with such an impeccable movie producer. I'm here with David Cameron. We're going to talk about his really so many accomplishments. Such a young man and quite impressive. But like I always do, David, every time I have a guest in a conversation, I always begin by asking the guest, to present himself or herself. And in this case, David, could you please tell us who is David Cameron?
Oh, absolutely. And thank you for having me on, and thank you for the very warm introduction. So, who David Cameron is you might not recall, but a couple of years ago, David Cameron was the Prime Minister of the UK.
Yeah, sure, right.
So, no, so to be serious, I mean, usually I just say I'm a film student, but I guess I'm not anymore because I'm graduated. So yeah, I guess you could say amateur filmmaker, um, all around storyteller. At least I try to be. And I'm just a 25-year-old trying to find his place in the world. I went to Woodbury University in Burbank, California, to get my film degree, and I worked with some wonderful people, both my peers and the faculty who were still very present in the industry. I learned a lot. I got pushed a lot, which I'm very thankful for. And I'm just trying to figure out what my corner of the planet is now.
But when I was reading your bio, and I realized that you have been fascinated with filmmaking since you were 8. So let me ask you this: is that because you were raising in a household where parents are also fascinated with that, or something very totally different, really, that caught your attention into filmmaking?
Well, absolutely. My mother is a huge part of it. I was cradled as a child on the side of active theater productions. I was in the wings as she was watching things, and I'm sure probably made a little too much noise for the people on stage. But yeah, I mean, from a young age, I was already in that world. It just made sense. It was intuitive to me. My mother's very theatrical, Anne Marino, who you've had on before, and I guess I didn't really have a choice. It was just a part of who I was and who I would be, and it does remind me of an incredible funny story that I have no recollection of because I was too young at the time. But my mom told me that all the time I would act out sort of death scenes in the living room where I would be
Really?
gasping. Yeah, like 3 or 4 years old, and I would be gasping and like slowly slumping onto the ground. And I would do a whole dramatic scene and then get up and then do it again.
So you got freaked
So
out when you were doing that, right?
I'm sure maybe the first time, but I don't think I was that good of an actor then.
Oh, okay. Okay. But you know, David, it says that now in high school, things began to be really serious when you started to, participate in even coordinating and some very important, rather short films, but film production. And there's one I was that in 2016, you had a Nutcracker Noir. So could you please tell us a little bit how this production came about?
Yeah, so that wasn't actually a short film. That was a stage theater production. It
Okay.
was kind of a half ballet, half play, and it kind of came about that my mother's a ballet teacher,
Mhm.
and she's put on so many Nutcrackers through her life that she's kind of made it a mission now to do a Nutcracker every year with a different vibe or a different theme,
Uh-huh.
just because it gets so tiring hearing the same exact story again and again. And I'd seen a couple of her productions, and I kind of just volunteered, like, I have a weird idea I'd like to try out. What if Nutcracker was a noir detective mystery? And
Okay.
she thought that sounded like a lot of fun. So I wrote some dialogue for some scenes to go out through the ballet and made a little mystery. And we got everyone on board, and it was a lot of fun.
And also, I understand that back in 2021, you're already a sophomore, and then you produced Barton, and you won Best Film of the Year. So, how did you feel when you got the news that somehow, I mean, your production has been nominated, celebrated? So how was it? What was the
Well, so it was a big surprise, and it also kind of wasn't at the same time because this was so my university has a film department, and they do that every year, the different student films that were made. And it's primarily for seniors and their thesis films. And so I heard about it, I heard what day it was going to occur, and I thought, well, I'm not a senior. I'm kind of busy. Maybe I should not attend and do something else. And then my film production professor, Kyle Soingen, just emailed me to say, you might want to be there. I won't tell you why, but you might want to attend. So I thought, oh, okay, maybe something interesting is happening. So I attended, and they told me that even outside of all the seniors, that the faculty chose my film as the top film that year. And that just, I was watching the Zoom call at the time, and I was so surprised that I didn't even know I was in the running. And that was the first kind of, yeah, because I thought it was just a senior's playground. I was a sophomore. I thought, like, I
of
made it for a class. It's not going to be that big a deal. But apparently it was. And
course?
I got to, yeah, I got to, politely brag about it a little bit afterwards to my fellow peers, like, ooh, my film got picked. But that was the first real confidence booster I got when going to my university that, oh, people are actually paying attention and they do think there's some value in my work. So now I need to take it even more seriously.
Mhm. But so that comes my next question, David. When you are an independent film producer, and actually you don't really have a big budget to work with, but you
Or
need
none.
oh no, and you need good actors, to make to at least to help you make this transition from your dream into a reality of what you have been dreaming of. So, could you please tell us, David, how difficult it was for you to produce this and to find the right people to work with you on the project? You can tell us a little about
Yeah, so especially for finding the right people, especially for acting, um, really the most important part I think is casting.
that.
That you can get it all right on your very first step of who you ask to step into the role. And not in all of my productions, not everyone is an actor by trade. Some people it was even their first performance. But I took a lot of time and would welcome these actors into the process when I was sort of trying them out to see if they were a good fit. Sometimes I kind of already had someone in mind and I tried to write it to their strengths, and that really helped. But for me, the biggest way of figuring out if it was going to work, if these were the right people, is the table read. I tell someone I'm interested in you for the part. It's a lot of work, but I think it would be a lot of fun. Would you come to a read through of the script at my house and with the whole cast? And I would get everyone together and I would figure out how they communicate outside of the script. Was it fun? Were they working together? And if they were, that's almost always a great sign that you can make the production work. Because if everyone's a good sport and it's play, it's not work, it's play, like they're actually enjoying it, then the more invested they are, the better the end result is.
I see. It's just like everything else in life also, they have to see the heart. But also, I know you're producing the film, but also you're giving them an opportunity to shine as actors. So if the production of the film, gets noticed and received an award, and they all actually become instant celebrities also, right? David, I know. So what you're saying here, so you're auditioning sometimes for those roles, and at the university campus you do that, or maybe you ask mom to give you advice on the folks you would be asking to participate. How do you do that?
Yeah, well, it's definitely a mix of both. The university encourages you, because everyone's a student there, to try and use each other because it's always a learning experience. But I did film a lot of it outside of the university just
Mm-hmm.
through logistics. And you're right that my mom was a big boon because she's had to cast things before and she knows a wide array of people. So sometimes I just have to float like, this is kind of the person I'm looking for. And she'll have a catalog of, oh, this person might work, this person might work. Um, yeah, so you'd be surprised how often it's just, oh, this person goes to our church and he has kind of an interesting look and personality. Like, let's just float it by him. It can be
Right.
really casual at times.
Okay.
And yeah, so you get an assortment of people who want to be actors and people who've never acted before in their life. And you kind of mentioned the idea that this is an opportunity. And I won't be so self-aggrandizing to say like, oh, if you're in one of my films, you're going to be a star. Everyone's going to know your name. But for the people who want to be actors, I really treat them seriously, and I think I give them a lot of fun opportunities to practice their craft kind of on their own, and maybe not being instructed by a teacher, but to really try their own techniques. But to me, almost the funnest part is seeing the non-actors step into a role,
Mm-hmm.
and the buy-in can sometimes be here or there kind of spotty. If I ask them to do a part, they want to help out, but they think I can't really act. And then when they step into it, I give them a little direction, and the light bulb kind of turns on like, oh, this makes sense. I get it. I didn't know I could do that. And that's always where I have the most fun, is getting people to realize that almost anyone can act. You just have to have the right frame of mind, and you have to have the right director or crew or whatever it is kind of giving you an objective to achieve. And so I always get a smile on my face when someone I brought on board kind of discovers I
Mm-hmm.
like acting. I
That's a
may want to do
talent.
more of that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Now I know that in 2022 also for the film Lantern Light, and the film got noticed as one of the top finalists at the Beijing Film Festival. Would you tell us, David, how do you get to be, to participate first and to this very well prestigious, globally renowned Beijing Film Festival? How did you do that? Did mom help you also on that?
Well, so we use the website Film Freeway, and it's
What
kind of
website? Okay.
filmfreeway.com.
Okay.
It's a pretty expedient way of seeing a wide array of different film festivals.
Okay.
Some of them are pretty big, some of them are legit. And a few are starting out, maybe don't have that much of a reputation yet. So it can be kind of a big deal to try and filter them. And our approach with something like Lantern Light, where it didn't have any dialogue. So for that, we kind of realized just looking at film festivals in a United States Western centric perspective didn't make a lot of sense because you have the whole planet to pitch this. You have a lot of people that might want to see it.
True, true.
So we just kind of poked around and saw what looked like the most interesting film festivals in different countries that, maybe we couldn't even speak the language. And the Beijing Film Festival piqued our interest. It looked kind of cool. And then they reached out and
Wow.
and wanted to have it there. And that was a lot of fun because they were very earnest and in wanting it present and were very cooperative and kind of making the language barriers work. And they just treated us really well, and it was a great experience.
That's interesting. That's interesting. So now, David, does the question I want to ask you, because with filmmaking also comes screenwriting. So you can write a beautiful story. For example, I'm a novelist. I know how to do that. Beautiful creative prose and all that. But if I want to make that transition from, creative writing as a novelist into screenwriting or screenplay for film or feature films, I know it's a whole different ballgame. So
Yeah,
because yeah, Gabrielle Constant, who's also a screenwriter but also a novelist, and he says that it's very difficult to take 400 or 500 pages story and to condense that into a 1 hour, motion picture. So how difficult do you think it might be for a novelist to become a screenwriter for
yeah. I
movie
I
production?
I should credit a lot of what I've learned to my screenwriting professor, Valerie Mayhew at Woodbury. Very tough, but quite knowledgeable. She worked on the X Files. I just love her. She's a lot of fun. And when, like, let's take, for example, when I was writing the screenplay for my thesis film, which we
Yeah.
actually started in the beginning of junior year. And
Mhm.
then every semester we'd have a different stage of the process until we were ready to film. So we actually were stuck with that script for a long time. And so we had to make sure it really was solid. And the editing process to go through it was really difficult because there's kind of a ratio of screen time to page count that if you can get it right is usually about a minute per page.
Okay.
And so you can't offload a lot of content on a single page. It has to keep moving. And there'd be so much that my professor would say I have to cut for the sake of brevity, for the sake of pacing, that really hurt. Like a line that I was attached to, and she
Mhm.
said, "Well, it's just got to go. Maybe a good line, save it for a different project, but it's not serving your
Yeah.
story right now." Um, and so my big takeaways from that class is you have to say a lot with a few words, especially in what's called the like descriptive or the action
Mhm.
sections of the
Mhm.
script that describe nonverbal elements of the scene. You have to be to the point. It can almost start to sound like caveman speak from just how brutally efficient you're writing it, because you're just trying to communicate a lot in a very short amount of time. And the benefit of that is it really makes you iron out what is important for the scene, what's going to move it forward, what does someone reading this and visualizing what the scene in there looks like in their head, what do they need to know? And I think that's really useful because if you're zeroing in on what you're trying to do with a scene, it forces you to deal with kind of meandering writing, writing that isn't very um,
Descriptive,
pointed. Yeah, it's
because
if
the camera will do that for you, is what you're saying.
yeah, if the scene's kind of dragging,
Mhm.
you can tell on the page of the screenplay because someone could read it and say, I don't know what the point of this page is. I don't
Mhm.
know what the through line is. And by having to identify what's important and cutting out the rest, it really makes you think, okay, this is what the scene's trying to do. And then you kind of start to reevaluate, well, when I've cut all that stuff out, is it effective at achieving that? And if it is, great. But if it's not, then maybe I just cut all the stuff out. I have a little more space. I can kind of start to rebuild it. So yeah, it's a grueling editing process. You have to be tough on yourself not to get too flowery or
Exactly.
yeah. And I guess the best way to put it is if you had a crew looking at a script, everything on it has to be something they can talk about quickly.
You know,
Bullet point,
that
bullet
was going to
point.
be my next question. So you have to have a crew with you to
Yeah,
team, you know, to actually to screen out the whole story and making sure this is something that really that can shine on the big screen.
absolutely. Yeah,
Mhm.
because you might hear the term a working script. You could write a screenplay and it could be excellently well written and it could be just for people to enjoy reading. There's nothing wrong with that. But a screenplay on a film set, it's a tool. It's not the end product. It's
Uh-huh.
a instructional manual for everyone to know what their part of the whole production is.
Yes. Okay.
So you can kind of use that to your advantage, know what information is useful to tell people and what can kind of naturally come up in the directing process. If there's an emotion you want to get,
Mhm.
the director will do his homework, read a script, figure out that's an element of the scene, and bring that to the table himself. You don't necessarily have to spell it out like that every time. So, yeah, it's definitely a useful tool, and it's got to be something that a lot of people can pick up quickly and
But let
understand.
me ask you something, David. Is it allowed in film production that an actor can improvise? Because it seems so natural when they speak. It doesn't look like something they're reading from a script. It sounds so natural. It's only, you know, a natural speech that such a simplicity and talking and dialogues can come about. So you said that you actors sometimes are giving the some sort of a okay to be natural, so to speak.
Oh,
Not
absolutely. Yeah.
okay.
In
Okay.
fact, if anything, it kind of depends how the film set's being run. I know in a lot of television, the person who wrote the script will be on set and can rewrite things on the fly if it's not working. But especially on film sets, once the writer has finished the screenplay, they're out of the process. They've handed off their torch and it's up to the crew to make it.
Okay.
And so if something's not working for an actor, a director can absolutely say, cut this, fix that, choose a different word. Because at the end of the
Okay.
day, it doesn't matter how good the writing is. It matters
Mhm.
how good it's portrayed by the actor or how well it's
Beautiful.
portrayed by the
Exactly.
actor.
That's
Yeah.
right. That's right. Okay. I mean, too many times it looks so natural. For example, and the part in your short film where the actor holds the gun
Hmm.
and the young lady is down on the ground. You see, it sounds so natural. The reaction, you know, to the an action and a reaction to it. It sounds so natural. So that means you didn't have to read, from a script to do that because it's a human reaction in terms of uncertainty and when you feel you're in danger, this is how you would react.
Mm. Yeah, it's well that's the really one of the benefits of doing rehearsals and the cold reads and things like that. A good actor worth their salt is going to know the script by heart. They don't need to take a look at it. They just have all the dialogue down. And then when you do what's called a blocking rehearsal, where you figure out all the steps of where you're going to stand, where you're going to walk to,
Mhm.
you sort all of that out. You kind of figure out the scenes and stages. They know their words, they know their movements. Once that's committed to memory, forget it. It's just automatic. And that's when they really have the brain capacity to start doing the performance. And that's just when the magic happens. It's just there's not a better feeling than being a director and seeing your actors start to get it and kind of take the scene away from you and own it. Um, and There's also a lot that happens right before a scene even takes place because, just because that's where we cut it in the film, the camera's still been rolling for a while.
Okay.
There's a whole conversation that might have happened between a director and an actor 2 seconds before what you actually see in the scene. Especially for emotional stuff like that, I found it's helpful to try and work through it with the actor, help
Hmm.
them reach the point they need to be at, and then
Hmm.
immediately pull out. Once you
Hmm.
sense they have the emotion, then step out as soon as you can.
Okay.
That's one of the advantages of filmmaking is you
Hmm.
can cut it down second by second, frame by frame.
Uh-huh.
So the actor could be there right off camera speaking to uh, the director and back and forth, and you can just remove that. The director can become a ghost, but they can still be so involved in the scene they're almost like another actor. So it's really a fun process. So how much flexibility you have in telling the story, um, because you can edit it however you need to.
Correct. Cool. So let me ask you something now. Do you have a particular preference for a particular genre in film production?
Well, I think the first short film you brought up is a good frame of reference.
Yeah.
Spartan,
Mhm.
a period western, late
Right, right.
1800s. I'm a cowboy nerd. I
Yeah,
love that
that's what I was
stuff.
going to ask you.
Yeah,
Yeah, he's so good at it, huh? Hey.
yeah. You could argue that half the reason for that script and why I'm in it is because I just wanted to talk in a cowboy accent and wave around some six shooters for a while. But I just love that genre because I think it's such an incredible blend of what you could argue is sort of modern day, modern world sensibilities, but you
Right.
still have kind of the mythos of the errant knight that's going from town to town and has his own code of ethics. And it's just a wonderful blend of the capabilities of society and its sensibilities are kind of at a tipping point.
Hmm.
One foot in the past and one foot in the future. And I just think you can tell so many stories with that.
I got you. So this is your preference, you know? What about what would become second in line?
Sci-fi.
Really?
I yeah.
You're the
I
second guest on the conversation to tell me that. But why is that? Good. I had a Canadian, British Canadian gentleman who told me, he's fascinated about it. But why does become my son also?
I
Yeah, he's crazy about that. Oh, so what makes is that something millennials of falling in love with or something? Or what makes such a fascination? What makes it so?
Well, I think it's because of the predictive aspect of it. If you look at a genre like fantasy, you can develop your own rule sets and build your own world.
Mm.
And whatever you say kind of goes to an extent. But
Right.
good science fiction always asks what's possible? What's actually something we could see in the future? And then let's maybe push the story a little beyond what's possible. Only a hair, but just enough that if you squint, it's something you could see in the future.
Okay.
Um, if you look at Star Trek, for instance, the original series, the
Right.
idea of portable communication devices you can have in your pocket, just an incredible concept. And now we have technology that makes that look so antiquated. Uh, it's the best sci-fi gives you really tantalizing and also terrifying glimpses in the future. And then it kind of just makes you think what you want the future to look like, especially with all this discussion about artificial intelligence. It's just
Right. Right. Right.
hitting the mainstream consciousness now. That's been a major theme of sci fi for a long time. And a lot of people have the correct, not correct, but have extra tools, extra terms, ways of thinking that have
Mhm.
kind of prepared them to have those discussions. The ideas
Ah,
about like artificial consciousness, is that even possible? The Turing test, things like that. Uh, and it's just because a lot of the time they've picked it up from science fiction media that bothered to ask these questions.
hmm. So let me ask you this question: Who is your favorite actor of all time?
Ooh, that's a tough one. Just because you sort of have a favorite actor for different things. I mean, it's hard not to say Daniel Day Lewis
Really?
because that, Yeah, he gets so intense that I know I'm watching a movie, but he still freaks me out. I still want to like, oh, that's I'm not ready for that.
Mm.
Um, I mean, his performance as Lincoln was incredible as well.
Uh-huh.
And yeah, I think I'll have to settle on that for now. I could go for kind of a hammier option and say Vincent Price just because he's so much fun, and that answer would make my mom proud. But yeah, I'm not sure. It's that's a loaded one, but I will say tentatively Daniel Day-Lewis.
Well, okay. So what about our film producer?
Producer.
Uh,
Now to certain people this will sound heretical, but might be Kathleen Kennedy.
really?
She's kind of behind a lot of Spielberg films, a lot
Right.
of she's a big deal with Star Wars now. And I'll say that because I think she's done one of the most effective things, if it's true, this is just a story, that I think a producer can do. Where on one of Steven Spielberg's sets, he was really riding his crew hard. He was being kind of obnoxious. And she sat him down because the director's not really the one in charge, it's the producer because they have the keys to the money. So if they stop the production, then it stops. And Kathleen Kennedy pulled Spielberg aside and said, "This is not how you treat the crew. They're here to see your vision.
Right.
You can't treat them poorly."
Okay.
And he's always worked with her since then because I think he kind of respected someone who could say, "This is not good behavior." And I think a lot of the time producers get a bad rap because since they're the money people, they can be kind of draconian when it comes to the vision of the production versus reality. But I think a good producer uh, acts like Kathleen Kennedy, who assesses the health of the production, how the crew's feeling, do they want to be involved, and actively works to keep that in good shape.
So we've been talking for a while. Now, my last question, David. So is there any particular lesson that you would want to give to young people like you who would want to invest, you know, to follow, such an interesting career at becoming a brilliant filmmaker? Because I know you're shaping up to be one.
Well,
So,
I hope so.
so what lesson, what advice, I would say, you would want to give
I think this is something you could say about any form of storytelling, but to film especially, is filmmaking is all about empathy.
to?
That if you're trying to tell a story, you have visual, audio, writing tools that you use, but the whole point of that is to create a story that elicits a specific emotion in the audience. I want them to cry at this scene. I want them to feel angry. If you can't have empathy for how your audience will react to things, you've already lost. You have to be able to step in someone's shoes, take a look at what you're making, and understand what the color choice or the framing or music in the background versus completely silent, what effect that will have on the audience, because you want to fine tune that and you want to take advantage of how elements in your film are going to impact the people watching it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the best filmmakers can be ones that maybe don't even tell a story that people will talk about for decades to come.
Mm-hmm.
But they make a film that when the audience leaves the theater, they have a specific feeling that the filmmaker had in mind, and that sticks with them. If you've done that, the rest doesn't matter.
Okay. All right. So how do you see yourself? One last question, maybe 5 years from now, David.
Well, if I'm lucky, if I'm really lucky, which some days I feel like I'm not, um, I would love to have sold a screenplay. I have one I'm going to start working on the beginning of 2024. And as they might say in the business, I think the idea has legs. I think it's something people can get excited about. And the big thing is, I'm super excited about it, but I also have no ego about it. So once it's sold, do whatever you want with it. It won't bother me. So that's my hope. We'll see if that can happen, but that's my hope.
So with that, I'm just going to say it's been such a pleasure to have had the opportunity to speak to you, David. Quite an impressive young man.
Well, thank you so much for having me on, and thank you for saying things like I'm quite impressive. I'm not sure if I believe it most of the time, but I really appreciate someone like you holding me in such high regard. So thank you.